Step into the Gardener's Lodge with me, Mykal. Let's explore the fascinating world of gardening, nature and ecology through conversations with experts, thought leaders, passionate enthusiasts and of course, some real good friends. All from the cosy heart of the lodge. Come on in. The Gardener's Lodge podcast is created on the traditional lands of the Darug and Gundungurra people in the Blue Mountains. We pay respect to all First Nations elders, past and present. G'day and welcome to the show. So a lot has changed in my world in the past 12 months. I have moved to the other side of the globe, now calling the UK home. I'm slowly finding my feet here, and it's actually offering me the opportunity to learn so much about the landscape here and kind of remove myself from that sort of Australian-centric way of thinking when it comes to the natural world. And I'm really enjoying it, actually. I'm really enjoying reevaluating my perspectives and repositioning them into a more global context. Which brings me to today's episode. I am talking with Tom France. He's a British ecologist who happens to produce content teaching the public about the wonders of the UK flora and fauna, with an emphasis on needing to embrace wild spaces. So look, this is my first interview on UK soils, and I couldn't think of a better person to talk to teach me the ropes, lay down the law when it comes to British ecology. So before we jump straight into the interview, let's ask Tom our 6 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, favourite plant?
Cornflower.
Favourite way to connect with nature?
Temperate rainforest. Being in one.
Being in one, yeah, okay, brilliant.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Actually, well, here you go. You might have already answered it. What is the most beautiful garden or natural landscape that you've ever visited?
A remaining fragment of the Caledonian rainforest in Scotland. It's just, it really is. It's so different and just so rare.
Amazing. I'm going to have to visit. Now, you're not really a gardener, but what is your favourite garden tool?
You put me on the spot there. God, I guess a trowel.
Perfect.
Yeah, every man's tool, I guess.
Yeah. And if you could be one, a plant or an animal?
I'd be an animal because, I'd have more control and probably not be mown down.
When you're stuck and looking to research anything garden or nature related, where do you go for the most sound and trusted information?
Obviously, ChatGPT. No, I'm only joking. Kew Gardens. Kew Gardens have an amazing research website where you could basically put in most plants, and it tells you you're not there when they were discovered, all the Latin stuff, natural distribution. It's and I think that is something that. Sorry, this is meant to be a short answer. People should be doing if you're buying a plant for your garden. Look it up first and see if it's good or not.
Good idea. Right plant, right place is what I'm hearing there.
Yeah. Yes, I should have said that. That's much more concise.
No, that's fine. How did you first fall in love with the natural world?
It actually happened quite late, surprisingly. I think I was about 16 years old. I was sat in my grand's living room, looking out at the window, and she were looking at the tree at the end of the garden. Well, she was telling me, she was like, "I planted that tree," and I just said, I thought to myself, I was like, I have no idea what that, what is that? So I asked her, "Gran, what's that?" And she said, that's a hornbeam tree. And I thought to myself, well, that sounds pretty cool. And then I realized in that moment, I had no idea what anything was. I'd spent, my whole childhood out in nature, really enjoying it. And obviously had that basic appreciation that, everyone's got, I think. But I then realized, oh my God, there's so much I don't know. And then I kind of became obsessed with trying to find things out. And I started, I guess, the old-fashioned way. Start with I think my gran had a book, that tree identification guide from 1960s, went out into the woods, had no idea what I was doing. And it all kind of stemmed from there, really. And then, started studying it at university. And now I just can't shut up about it, to be honest.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm the exact same. I guess everyone sort of has that moment, don't they, where they kind of look around them and go, oh God, there's a huge world out there that I know absolutely nothing about. I think in my kind of world, that often happens when people maybe buy their first house or end up helping someone in the garden that does know a little bit more than them, and they kind of go like, "Oh,
Mm,
wow, there's like I thought I knew everything, but I know nothing now." I guess so. From there, you've then obviously studied. You work in the field. When did
yeah.
you decide that you were just
Yeah.
gonna start to teach people about flora and fauna?
I think I was just always trying to do that with my friends, my girlfriend. We go on walks, and I wouldn't shut up about it. And I think someone said to me, I can't remember who it was, but they just said, "You need to start telling other people about this. We've listened to you enough, no." And I think
Shut up.
it's just yeah,
Tell someone
basically,
who
you've got
cares.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's something I'd always, I watched, like we all do, watch loads of content, and I just thought, well, this is something I guess I could do, and I kind of started it, you know, to kind of further my career. To get a job in ecology is really difficult
Yeah.
in the field, So I just thought this is something else I could do, and then yeah, it kind of just took off from there, and I've built a really nice community of people, and it's yeah, I really enjoy making the videos and the content because you get to be quite creative with it as well, and I think it's just it's it's generally pretty positive. I mean, you can obviously take a negative spin on stuff, especially with biodiversity loss, but
Of
it's
course.
in there's just so much stuff on social media which is really negative. So it's just nice to you know put something out most of the time that's positive anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of your stuff is positive, and it's like super educational. And you have this like really amazing way of balancing kind of like entertainment with education, and I think that's probably why you've been able to build like quite a strong little community around you.
Yeah.
But of course, in real life, you do work in the field, and actually, you have kind of the most like badass title, which is environmental crime officer. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
What is an environmental crime officer?
Well, so I work for the Environment Agency,
Yeah.
and that's the government body that is looking after the environment in the UK. And I'm currently working in the water industry sector, which is obviously have not got the best publicity at the moment.
Yeah.
Of the work that I'm doing is really important, and we really need to be ensuring that our waters aren't being polluted because it's just so important to all of our ecosystems, habitats. You know, so much is water related, and so that's the work I'm doing currently, which is tough. We're in a we are in a difficult position, but we are pushing forward, and we're going to really start to get some seriously good results in the coming years, I'm sure.
So is that kind of like investigating spillages and dumping and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so it's wide ranging. So we do it's land and water. So
Yeah.
agriculture, water spills, any kind of pollution events, like responding to events as well. But obviously we've all read the news, and in the last couple of years, it's been really clear that water industry have been dropping the ball for quite some time, underinvesting and really causing damage to our ecosystem. So there's been a real push from the government and the EA to really to start to sort this out really, and that has to come with harder regulation and enforcement. So
Of course.
I really enjoy it. Instant response is really cool. Going if there's an environmental event, like going out responding, that kind of thing. And there's a lot more to be done, but yeah, it's great to be able to really start to make a difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I suppose that leads us back to your social media stuff as well. Like you clearly have like a strong passion to make change and to teach and inform and make the world a better place. With your social media content, like what are some of the biggest misconceptions about British nature that you find yourself correcting the most?
It's such a difficult one with the UK because we are a nation of animal lovers, wildlife lovers. We watch Spring Watch and Autumn Watch every year, and everyone loves going out to the countryside, going on long walks, and I think that's really innate in most people in the UK, and so I think most people would be shocked to learn about just how degraded and the state that we're in, really, the state of our nature in
Mm,
the UK. Um, and I think really that is such a barrier to solving some of the key issues that we face, particularly with biodiversity loss. And I think if people realised just where we were, I think there'd be big protests. I think people would be up in arms because
Yeah.
the UK, we have the highest number of charities, NGOs, wildlife NGOs anywhere in the world. People give millions of pounds every year to nature-based causes, and yet we're still no better. In fact, you could say, in fact, we are in almost all metrics. Biodiversity is on decline. I think 1 in 7 species in the UK is threatened with extinction, and yet
Wow.
no one's really talking about that, or no one really realizes that. And that was exactly the same for me. I remember as a teenager going for walks in the Lake District or Snowdonia, mountainous regions in the UK, and looking at the hills and seeing you know beautiful peaks but covered in no vegetation, and you
Mm.
know and there'd be that last tree like high up on a cliff, out of reach from any sheep or wild deer. And obviously I just think, oh wow, how's that tree managed to, there isn't a tree for miles, how's that managed to get there? And
Yeah.
I just didn't realize that actually what I was looking at is a completely modified artificial environment that we have changed over thousands of years. And
Yeah.
really it's a ecological desert, what I was looking at. But obviously, you're still up in the hills, you're still out in the wild, quotation marks, and you still get that feeling of remoteness. So you still, that feeling that you kind of want when you're out in the wilderness, you still kind of get it. But then, and that's the problem, it's almost like Pandora's box in a way, because once you realize what you're looking at, then you know what you've lost, and that is depressing. And that was kind of something I've been struggling with my content, is because I want to kind of remain positive, but I think people do really need to realize what we've lost, what we're missing, and because if we know what we're missing, we know what we can bring back. And we, I think for most, because obviously you've got, everyone knows that pollution is bad. Everyone knows that intensive agriculture is bad.
Yeah.
All of the main drivers of biodiversity loss in the UK and around the world, we all know them, and people don't really need to be told them all the time, particularly in the UK. But they do really have pretty obvious solutions. We don't see it that way because we don't see the destruction. We don't feel the need to implement, wide scale biodiversity restoration, landscape restoration, because we don't see it. We don't. We all we see is green fields, hedgerows, and we think that looks great, and it does. It's
It
still
looks
beautiful.
nice. Yeah. Yeah. 2026 is upon us, and I have limited spaces open for my garden coaching and consultation sessions. Whether you're looking for help with plant identification, advice on care and maintenance, or tips for improving your soil and plant nutrition, I'm here to help. As a garden designer, I'll help you think creatively about your outdoor space, offering tools and ideas to give you a fresh perspective on your garden projects. My coaching and consultation sessions can happen right in your garden if you live in the UK, or online if you're anywhere else in the world. My goal is to meet you where you are and support your unique garden journey. Whether you're just starting out, looking to refine your skills, or simply need a second opinion or someone just to bounce ideas off, you have found your space. Head to the link in this episode description or shoot me an email at hello@thegardenerslodge.co.uk. I guess it's an interesting thing, like coming from Australia. I'm in the position that I've been here 4 months now,
Right.
and
Okay.
I see, I go out into the countryside. It's beautiful, but it's obviously starkly different. It's very manufactured. It's very man-made. It's very controlled environments, really. Um, and I come up against planning, like we're potentially looking at buying a block of land, maybe building, but you kind of come up against these planning laws that are like, you need to protect the countryside, you need to protect the green
Yeah.
fields. And it makes me think, what for? Not that I think that
Mm.
we should be building houses there, but, why are you protecting and and trying to entrench something that is so man-made in the first place? It kind of it just confuses me a little bit. And on that note as well, you've just got my brain whirling now.
No,
um,
that's fine. Yeah.
I think people also look at Australia in a way and think of that as a very natural place, a very untouched place. But if you hammer down into the Australian landscape, it's actually also a very controlled environment. Well, once was. Indigenous people have lived on the continent for 60,000 years. They consistently burnt on rotation, burnt the vegetation so that they could hunt animals, so that they could grow their own crops and things like that. Of course, when white people landed, they just saw bush and went, "Wow, this is untouched. They're doing nothing here," kind of thing. It's actually completely inaccurate, but it does make you think that I guess the destruction that you're talking about here is actually more so the destruction caused in the last 200 years post-industrialization, and less so, I guess, the slow farming, the slow use of the land that, like, of course, us as human beings need to use the land in a certain way to survive. But I think one thing that a lot of indigenous cultures have done right is that they also give back. And I guess I think that we have lost a lot of the giving back.
Yeah. No, really lovely, really well put. Yeah, I find the same frustrations in the UK where we are obsessed with preservation. You know,
Yeah.
we love, and it's all about heritage, and this is it's something that I struggle with, and talking about it because there's a place in Wales called the Cambrian Mountains, and some people call
Yes.
it the Cambrian Desert because it's in the middle of the Wales, and it's just been sheep farms for 500 years. And sheep are not native to the UK, and they are aggressive grazers, and they will slowly destroy forests because they love nothing more than fresh tree saplings. So over time, you know, trees stop growing because the sheep eat them, and then the woods slowly disappear. And that's what's happened all around the uplands in the UK. But to a farmer or many people in the UK who are proud of our countryside, they will look at that landscape of, beautiful stone fences, the rolling hills, and they will say that is a cultural landscape. This
Mm.
is heritage, and farmers used to know, they'd have a name for every single field. And so that is so ingrained in us in the UK. This idea of the rural ideal landscape of neatness and tidiness, and we're obsessed. Um, we're absolutely obsessed with maintaining and preserving nature, preserving it exactly how it is, and it kind of in our minds how it always has been. And I just find that so frustrating because nature is dynamic. It's always changing. It's always changing from one state to another, and then there'll be something else to come in, and well, if you've got to have a grassland which will turn into shrubland, and then that will turn into a small woodland, and then that will turn into a larger woodland. But then
Mm.
something will come over; those trees will then fall down, and things will change, and it's who are we to decide what the best course is in many ways? Because I would argue that I don't think we understand all the intricacies of how nature works, all of the tiny little interactions between all the different species that we
No.
have. And so I think if we're claiming to be preserving nature, then I think we're claiming to say we get it, we know what's best, we understand everything, and therefore we decide. And I don't think that's right. And I find it really frustrating. It's
Such a humanist kind of trope where you think you're the center of the universe and you think that you know the way that things are supposed to look and be and behave.
totally agree. And well, and you see that in gardening as well. I'm sure we can get onto that as well. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I used to live in Brighton, and we have the South Downs National Park, which again is parts of it are lovely, but so much of it is just barren agricultural land that's been heavily grazed. And you'd go for walks, and you wouldn't see any wildflowers, you wouldn't see any insects, in the height of summer, and you'd find that I would then start to find that so depressing because I could see the potential of this landscape. And
Mm.
then you go on the South Downs National Park website, and it says the South Downs National Park preserving the heritage of the English countryside. And I'm thinking to myself, what, the heritage of destruction and nothingness, just.
Food
And so
production, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, and of course
Yeah.
it's very difficult. Food production is very important, and there needs to be a balance. But right, and we can get onto this if we talk about rewilding. I don't really want to see viable agricultural land being taken out of production. I don't think that makes sense for anybody, and I think
No.
farmers do need to be protected. And I think the current deals, particularly the deal with Australian beef farms right now, is terrible for the UK and terrible for local farmers. However, I think there needs to be a much better balance.
Well, let's dive into that. Let's talk about rewilding. For me, it's an interesting concept because, okay, in a garden sense, right? What are you doing? You're planting things, you're kind of letting things be, and kind of go wild, I suppose. But the reality of the matter is, it's not ever going to be wild, is it? It's still a
Mm,
garden. I guess in more larger scale landscapes, rewilding might look like reinstalling potentially an apex predator or a certain animal that's within the food chain that's been missing. I know that there's a lot of talk in the media at the moment about beavers and bringing beavers back into the British landscape, which I think is pretty cool actually. But what does rewilding really mean to you?
it's a pretty hot topic in the UK right now, and that's great.
Mm,
I remember when I first heard about it, it was kind of fringe, and now everyone seems to be talking about it. But it's definitely been massively polarized, which is also problematic. And I think people have, they hear rewilding and now they think, oh my God, they're bringing wolves, they're bringing bears back. We're
yeah.
all going to die. This is terrible for farming. Everyone's going to lose their livelihoods, that kind of thing. And this is a big threat to the traditional British countryside and way of life. Um, and I think it's not that. It's just not that serious, or that
No.
deep, for lack of a better word. I think rewilding for me, obviously, yes, at the top of it, you have got the bringing back apex predators or ecosystem engineers or anything that has been is no longer there, that used to live, used to be native, which I think is important and something to aim towards. But for me, rewilding, ecological restoration, habitat restoration, all of these things to me mean the same thing. What do we have and what have we lost? So, what can we do in the shortest amount of time to get whatever you're trying to rewild, habitat, ecosystem, landscape, to a position where we can then take a step back, let go of the reins, and let nature start to take its course? I
Mm,
think so. That's kind of the idea. Is rewilding is kind of the idea that nature takes control. We kind of let nature do what it should. And that is a lovely idea, and it does work in the right place. So if, let's say, classic example, Nep Estate in West Sussex, I believe, that it was a agricultural farm right in the middle of the English countryside, the southern countryside. They stopped farming in 2000 and just did nothing. And it's an incredible success story. It looks like a British savannah. It's a crazy alien landscape where you've got completely, no fences, shrubs, and it just looks weird and alien, kind of what the UK should look like. It's not all
mm,
neat and tidy. But that was successful because it's right in the middle of southern England. It's got seed sources, woodlands, and plants, and everything all around it in a pretty good, ecological position. So if you sit back and do nothing, you know, seeds will fall and animals will come in, and that you've got movement, and so that will be a success if you do nothing. But then if you were to go to the Scottish Highlands, for example, which have been completely destroyed by agriculture and overgrazing for hundreds of
mm.
years, pre industrial revolution as well. Of course, that sped it all up. If you were to do a secluded glen, which once would have been part of the Great Caledonian Forest, of which now only 1% remains, or less than. If you were to do nothing for 30 years there, not much would happen because there probably isn't a tree for a mile.
Yeah.
So in that, you know, in that sense, you have to get involved. You have to, you really need to start planting trees. You
You have
need
to
to get,
intervene, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But And so you do it, but so you would get you try and take local seeds from the remaining native trees and start a widespread tree planting campaign. Probably put a deer and sheep fence around it for the first 10, 20 years to let it establish. And then after 20 years, you're in quite a good position. Then perhaps you can start to think about, okay, maybe we don't need to intervene as much. Maybe we can take the fence away. You've got to look at what you've got and look what you've lost. But you need to realize, I think, that we can't recreate the past
No.
as much as we like to. You've always got to set your baseline. And because the reason you can't recreate the past is because we humans exist, and we exist how we are now, with our roads and railways and cars and everything like that. And I think for any rewilding strategy to be successful, it has to involve humans, and there has to be space for us in that environment, whatever you're trying to restore or recreate. So
It's an interesting thing to think about, because I think there's probably very little will of governments or counties to do these type of things unless they are for public use, almost, like you're talking about that a glen somewhere that's being rewilded. There's little willpower, except if you're kind of a private company that's doing good, or a private landholder. But if you wanted to do it on a large scale, it's not really going to happen unless it becomes probably some sort of park that then it can be handed over to the public to enjoy, because that's just the way we think about things, and that's the way government works. Everything's got to be for someone as opposed
yeah,
to for nature, which is a shame, really.
yeah, I totally agree, and that's something I struggle with, and it's something that I really want to keep bringing into my content. But it's a difficult thing to argue to someone who just doesn't understand or doesn't get it. Because you do need to have the passion for it, really.
And then, with content making, you've got maximum attention of 30 seconds to 60 seconds. You know what I mean? So it's like, how
Oh
do
yeah,
you distill all of this information that you've learned into that short burst that people can understand the entire concept of? And
yeah,
to be honest,
absolutely,
that's
absolutely.
why doing social media for myself ended up being a very frustrating process, because you've got all of these grand ideas, and none of them can just fit neatly into a cute little box that people go, oh, I've learned something. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, that's why I think next year I'm going to I'm planning to start to do some more longer form content, because you get so much more
nice.
engagement that way. And yeah, I mean,
Yes.
for me, it's that 3 second rule with Instagram, or any kind of short form media, that you've got to capture that attention in 3 seconds, or they've swiped away and you've gone.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to do silly things like jump out in front of a tree or do a handstand or a cartwheel like I do to kind of grab someone's attention,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
kind of
And you
works.
do
But
it
it's,
well. You do it well.
thank you. I try my best. It's generally my girlfriend's direction. She's just telling me, she's like, do something really silly. And I'm like, okay, I think I could probably try and do that.
It's always good to have a supportive
Because,
partner like
well, yeah, it's
that.
much harder when you're in a park, in a London park on your own with the tripod.
Yeah.
You're getting those weird looks.
Yeah.
That's a lot harder, to be honest. But, you think, oh, I could do this. Anyway,
You do it anyway.
um,
I was going to
yeah, but
say, we were just also talking about native plants, and I think in Australia we prize our natives. We
yeah,
put them up on a pedestal. We kind of, more so, I would say, with the younger generations in kind of our age bracket, we kind of almost in Australia go, ew, exotic plants. Like, no, get them away. Mostly because a lot of them are quite like terrible weeds, escaping to the bushland and all that kind of thing.
right.
How do you think the general UK public think about natives and conceptualize of native species within the UK?
Great question. And I think there's two answers. I think if you asked a gardener, then they would have a very good idea of that, of what native is and what isn't. If you ask a general
Yeah.
person, I think I don't know, wouldn't perhaps they'd have an idea, but it wouldn't mean too much to them. And I think it's one of the big reasons I started the social media, is because I realized when I started my journey and I realized I didn't know what anything was, I then realized that there's a name for that called plant blindness. And it's a condition that basically everyone in the modern world seems to have, unless you're interested in flowers or gardening, I think. And it comes back to that idea. We love nature. We love seeing the green trees and the green hedgerows and the green everything. Everything's green, but most people can't really identify hardly any plants, and
No.
that's such a problem, because plant identification has been integral to human survival, for thousands of years. It literally could have meant, death or dinner, really.
Yeah.
And our brains are designed. We have some of the best eyesight in the animal kingdom. We are incredibly well designed to recognize patterns and shapes, and that's what we've been doing for millennia. And since the Industrial Revolution, we've completely lost that. But that then causes a kind of a lack of awareness naturally, because you're, instead of seeing a beautiful hedgerow, let's say of native, a wildflower meadow, for example, of beautiful native plants, or you saw a patch of grassland that was covered in invasive species, to the average person that looks the same. And they might not know what's lost or what's gained. And so if you don't know what something is, how can you care about it? And if you don't care about something, then you're not really going to mind if that something has been lost. Sorry, that was just a tangent I wanted to go on about plant blindness. I think it's something that is really important to tackle. But back to your question about what the general public think about native plants. I think with gardeners, it can either go two ways. I think, people are really passionate about gardening in the UK, and people really know their stuff. And I think historically we've been obsessed with exotic plants in the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, the UK, massive colonizer, went all around the world, taking everyone's stuff and also everyone's plants, and, filling their gardens with the most beautiful exotic plants. And, we have a really we're very lucky. We have a really good climate, which we can grow plants from all around the world. And, programs like Gardeners World, they prize, incredible non-native plants as well as native plants. And I think that actually native plants have suffered because of people's love of gardening in many ways. There are so many plants. I mean, this obviously then leads us on to invasive species, which I know are a massive problem in Australia, but also a big problem in the UK. The three big culprits, I guess, are rhododendron. I mean, that's the big one. Japanese knotweed is terrible.
Yeah.
Giant hogweed. All of these were planted in rich gardens, hundreds of years ago, in the Victorian times, really, and have been allowed to spread. I think, in fact, rhododendron makes up 3% of our remaining woodland cover, which
Really?
is just, something. It's something shocking like that. And of course, it's
That's nuts.
I could go on about that, but I won't. One thing I would say, I think it's absolutely wild that you can still buy it in garden centres.
Yeah.
And people are buying it not knowing, because let's face it, it's got absolutely beautiful flowers of so many different colours, so many different varieties. And, it does look great in gardens. In fact, I remember as a child, my grand near Wigan, there was this old country estate, and we used to run through, huge, massive rhododendron bushes.
Yeah.
And I used to think it was great. I had no idea. And I think that's the problem. And then I guess, going back to valuing native over non-native, it's that issue, because native plants, of course, in Australia, it's the same anywhere. Everything that's native to the UK has evolved, or anywhere hasn't evolved together. And so they have evolved all those interactions, those links, which take thousands of years to happen. And so the best thing, it sounds simple, the best thing for native wildlife is native wildlife. And so we really need to start to see that in our gardens across the UK.
Do you have a sunny space in your garden that you just don't know what to do with? Well, I have a treat for you. A free perennial garden design that you can download right now. It's full of colour and year-round interest, and the best part is that it's pollinator and wildlife attracting. It's been designed with the UK climate in mind, but I know I've got listeners across the globe. So if you're in the southern states of Australia or the northern part of the US, this is the design for you. You can download your free perennial garden design, as well as my free Australian native garden design at the link in the description.
You know,
It's interesting because it's doing some research on natives here, and article or a press release or something like that, basically saying that natives don't matter in terms of building biodiversity, in terms of, feeding pollinators and all that kind of thing. And it kind of dumbfounded me a little bit, because I went, what are they talking about? Like, it has to matter. It has to be like integral, because these animals, insects, pollinators, birds, they evolved to feed and have symbiotic relationships with certain plants. And if you're saying it doesn't matter, that just doesn't make sense to me.
to me, again, yeah, alarm bells are ringing in my head as you said that.
Yeah.
I think that does sound crazy, and it kind of goes against everything that I've researched and been taught throughout
Yeah.
studying and well, no, well let's have a think about that. I mean, if they are just talking about pollen resources,
Mm.
I'm sure an argument can be made there. But it's all about the right non-natives. I think you can have I'm not saying, I would never say don't have non-native plants in your garden. That
No.
the UK, after all, if you're talking about the UK, we are an island that is impacted by ice ages every 90,000 years. A glacier 2 kilometers high comes down all the way down to Middle England and just destroys everything, and then goes away at 90,000 years later. So
Yeah.
really, nothing's technically really native. It's all kind of that European biome. So
Yeah.
if you're planting something from France that isn't here at the moment, that's fine, really, because everything will have evolved together. But then if you're planting from something from Australia, for example, then I don't think that probably won't be as beneficial to native wildlife, because most wildlife will be like, well, what am I going to do with that?
What the
For
hell
example,
is
it's
this? Yeah.
flowers that I see all of the time, really beautiful pelangoliums, part of the geranium family, I believe.
Yes.
They're all from South Africa. Beautiful, but they have really long parts in their flower, and the pollen's right at the very bottom. Sorry, parts is definitely not the correct scientific name, but all of
Stamens?
our insects don't. Yeah, all of our insects don't have long enough proboscis to get to the pollen. So essentially, you've got and you'll see gardens full of these beautiful flowers, useless for any native insect.
Yeah.
And there's so many examples of non-native plants like that, which technically aren't invasive. They're not outgrowing anything, or and they're not running amok, but they are. You could be a keen gardener and think, I'm going to plant. I want to restore. Have a restoration garden and plant all these plants. You could plant loads of plants, but they could actually just be completely useless to our native wildlife. So
Mm.
I guess, yes, you can have non-native plants that are definitely beneficial, but then I would then bring it back to the oak tree. The oak tree in the UK is, it's our favorite tree for so many reasons. It's the one tree that almost anyone can recognize, even kids. Everyone knows what it is, and it's also, I think, the most common pub name, the Royal Oak.
Yeah.
Actually, it might be the Red Lion, but it was one of those two. So everyone loves it, and it supports estimate 2,300 different species of animal, or species in some way. And then that's incredible. And
That's
then if you were to
impressive.
plant a eucalyptus tree, for example, from
Yeah.
from Australia, how many species is that going to support? A few nesting birds, not that many insects. And of course, with non-natives, they've always got the potential to become invasive, which is, I know,
Yeah.
something Australia really has been so horribly impacted by.
Well, yes, but I would also say that Australian natives are like humongous environmental weeds across the world.
Mm.
Eucalypts particularly. Like, actually, I just got back from India. Eucalypts everywhere.
Yeah.
absolutely everywhere. And I mean, they were brought in for like timber production and like for good
Yeah,
reasons
forestry,
and
yeah.
um, all of that kind of thing. But like, I sat down. I went to a wedding and it was in between ceremonies, and I sat down and was like put on like music, and there was like an Indian music video, and in the back of the music video there's eucalypts
Yeah.
behind them rapping or whatever. And I was quite shocked, and even here like there's quite a lot of Australian natives that are weedy, particularly on the coast,
Hmm.
which is interesting. I guess it's like one of those things for me, at least. I've got to kind of like flick my mindset a little bit onto like, hang on, these things may not aren't good everywhere,
Yeah.
Um, but definitely within Australia, we've definitely been impacted by a lot of exotic weeds coming in, and that's why our biosecurity is now so tight. Getting into Australia, I'm sure
Yeah.
you've probably seen Border Force. Um,
Yeah. No, it's crazy. I mean, I haven't been to Australia. I went to New Zealand. I know it's a quite
mm,
similar biosecurity. It was absolutely crazy.
yeah,
They made me take. They taking my boots off and they were scraping the bottles from the
yeah,
bottoms, and I was like, oh my god,
yeah.
you know. But yeah, I mean, we haven't got anything like that in the UK. I guess that
No.
things are coming in all the time.
No, God, you walk through customs here and you just like, there's no one, you can't even find anyone.
Yeah.
um, it's interesting though. I think the fact that Australia does have such like strong biosecurity laws, but then has such like terribly weak environmental laws at the same time. It's quite an embarrassment to me, to be honest. Like our current government has just like revised all the laws and actually has now brought in an environmental agency, and yet native logging is still on the cards. Australia has like we are in the midst of the biggest extinction crisis on Earth, right in Australia, due to native logging, due to the fact that we're clearing remnant forests. So I think that there is, something that the UK is doing well is that they are very protectionary around their what they'd call ancient forests, ancient woodland rather. Whereas Australia, nah, knock it flat, build some tables out of it. Probably just build some 2x4 timbers out of it and knock a couple of shitty houses of the last 20 years up from it. So there's a lot I love about Australia, but there's a lot further to go with it, particularly our environmental laws. The other thing with Australian weeds, the other ultra frustrating thing with weeds in Australia is that a lot of them aren't fire resistant. 99% of them aren't fire resistant, and yet our native wildlife is. Our native our native flora is fire resistant, most of it. And the number one way that we can eradicate a lot of these species is by burning our land, just as Indigenous people previously had. There's so many benefits to burning the Australian landscape, but the government still has this mindset that fire is bad, even though fire is a very, very natural part of particularly the Australian landscape, obviously not here in the UK. But yeah, a lot of our weed problems could be very well eradicated in those dry areas that do support burning. And I mean, I've spoken about this previously on other podcasts, but we need fire within our landscape to help germination of seeds, but it's just not happening. And I hope one day the newly installed Environmental Protections Agency will start to look at some of these things. But look, I don't hold hope.
Sure.
So in Australia, we have like a strong outdoor culture. Camping, hiking, surfing, fishing, and interestingly, like the bush is actually quite a dangerous place.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, probably more overblown than what I think in probably the British people's perceptions than it actually is.
Yeah.
But it
In
is
England,
very
we think
dangerous.
everything's going to kill you. In Australia, like
That's right.
100%.
Not really. Probably
I
the
would.
sun will kill you before anything else. You'll just get dehydrated and get lost. um, I guess like over here, I find that there is like, I feel people have a bit of like an aversion to nature, a bit of a um, keep it at arm's length. We stay out of there. Maybe that comes from kind of like, bad things happen in the woods type mentality of like, years gone by.
I think that it just comes from that disconnection.
Mm.
I think, and I guess that kind of lack of excitement, because the thing that you want really is to feel like you're in a wild place, to get that kind of excitement. And I guess
Yeah.
Australia can really give you that, because of course you've got the danger of the snakes and the spiders and the crocodiles and all those amazing animals, but also it's just the vastness and of all of it, I think. And we don't have that to a certain extent,
Mm.
especially the
Mm.
land size. And I think, but we do have it in pockets, and that's the kind of, if you live in London or if you live in the south, you can go on a lovely walk, rolling hills, but you're quite far away from anything what I would call exciting:
Yeah.
mountains, coastline, that kind of thing. And but also it's all just kind of the same. It's agricultural fields and tiny little woodlands and hedgerows, a village, and then again and again and again. And so we haven't got these big vast areas of biodiversity. And I kind of want to take back what I said. You don't need massive mountains, but what you do want is that kind of sense of wilderness and wildness.
Yeah.
Um, and that is something I think rewilding can bring us. I think it's so important that we need to create new habitat wherever possible, and wherever it makes sense to do so. And then we need to link up those habitats and create corridors for animals to be able to move around and be connected. And I think by doing that, that will regain people's curiosity. Because
Mm.
also in the UK, our public right, we love saying, it's something we say all the time in the UK, we have the best public rights of way in anywhere in the world. And that is true. We have footpaths everywhere we want to go, but we can only access, I think, God, let me get this right, I think we can only access legally about 12% of the land. The rest is privately
Mm.
owned, and technically we're not allowed to be there. So we can walk past that lovely manor house or estate, and you can walk straight past it because those rights of way laws are incredibly old. You can look at their lovely fields, but you can't go in it. And I think that lack of access is such a driver of lack of interest, really. And that's what's so great about the rewilding movement. Almost all rewilding projects and sites involve NGOs or people buying the land from rich landowners or whoever, starting to rewild and restore the land, and then allowing public access.
Yeah.
So it's not only a movement for ecological restoration, but also for allowing the general public greater access rights to the land. And I think that's so important. And if you can then build these habitats for the next generation, the generation after that, then that is going to increase public interest, awareness, and that passion for nature and excitement, really.
Completely, absolutely. It's interesting too. Like, I might have overblown it when by saying that people aren't particularly interested in it here.
Yeah,
I
you have a
guess
few angry English listeners
I'm
there.
sure I will now. Yeah, trying to gain them. Hang on. But it is an interesting thing. Like, I think about like I've been hearing the term here a lot, which is wild camping or like wild swimming,
Mm,
and it's it's an interesting thing to me because in Australia we would call it camping, we'd call it swimming.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I think probably you're right. As we start to build, as the UK starts to build back its wild spaces, people will feel more comfortable being within them. And those like wild swimming and wild camping terms will actually probably just fade to swimming and camping
absolutely.
because
Yeah, yeah.
I guess it's familiarization, right?
Yeah, no, that's a
Um,
great point. I think we crave wildness. We crave wilderness. I never really heard it explained to me like that. You're right. We do wild camping. But we say wild camping when because we would be camping on someone's privately owned land.
yeah,
So then then we're breaking it. We're breaking a law, even though if they catch you that you're allowed to, they tell you to leave, it's fine. You haven't actually broken any laws. You can't
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah,
prosecuted. But it's like that kind of that. Except we're looking for that excitement, so we think, okay, well, the best thing we can do is camp on someone else's land, and then that's wild enough. So yeah,
yeah,
absolutely, you're
exactly.
right. I think people in the UK, we crave wilderness, and because we don't really have it anymore, and we should be able to have it. Obviously, not quite on the same level as Australia, and I wouldn't, in a way, it's really nice not really having any native deadly animals. We're quite lucky in that regard, apart from an adder, like that could get you. Although I don't think
Yeah,
anyone's died from an adder bite until I think last one was 1980, so that would be unfortunate. But
yeah.
yeah, of course, we crave wilderness, and we can and should and need to bring that back to prevent biodiversity decline that's happening in the UK.
Something that the UK does brilliantly is obviously gardening.
Mm.
And as we've been talking about rewilding and all that kind of stuff, it's a huge movement within gardens. What's a piece of advice from an ecologist to a home gardener within the UK, within Australia even, that you would give to gardeners that are just starting out?
Okay, I think yeah, the first thing I would say is please don't use pesticides ever. It just, I think the concept of putting something horribly poisonous into our um, into your garden, your garden that isn't pest specific and will kill so many things that it
Hmm.
interacts with, is just a crazy idea. Say what you want about the French, but they have one of the best laws ever, where individual people and councils, the only people who can use pesticides are registered farmers. Everywhere else, they are banned because the French understand that these are poisonous chemicals that are incredibly harmful. They are propped up by massive conglomerate organizations that have tried for the last 100 years to tell us that these things aren't harmful when they are, and new compounds are being created all of the time to
Mm,
to to get around safety laws. So please stop using pesticides, because pesticides will only degrade your garden and actually, in many cases, create the perfect environment for a pest outbreak to occur.
exactly.
In a real world example, there's a moth called the cotton ball moth, native to Southeast Asia. It's got to South America, and it absolutely devastates soybean production farming across in South America, destroys in quite swathes and swathes and fields of soybeans. And if it started in the 50s, they created a new pesticide, got rid of it, and then it came back. And it's basically indestructible. And obviously, I'm not saying this is going to happen to your garden, but that's the concept we need to be thinking about. So stop using pesticides and try and instead utilize something in the agricultural world, which is called natural pest regulation. Because for every pest, an aphid, or anything like that, it has loads of things that want to eat it or parasitize it. And so the more biodiverse you make your garden, the more attractive you make your garden to all insects, then in theory, the more natural control you'll have. And so it's about, how can I make my garden as biodiverse as possible? And I guess, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that is in most cases planting natives and allowing wild spaces as well. So you can have natives, you can plant natives, but if you then let them flower and then cut them back, and leave bare lawn over winter, then there aren't going to be that space for insects to thrive. So having wild patches, even areas where you just don't do nothing, it doesn't have to be massive, then you just leave that throughout the year, and you give space for insects to overwinter, and then you will see a difference the year after and the year after that. And I guess if you have a pest outbreak, I know it's painful, but you just kind of have to let that happen. A balance will be found again, I think.
No, you're absolutely right. I kind of say to, and listeners have definitely heard me say this before, but like you're generally the biggest pest in your garden. If you start intervening too much,
Yeah,
you're going to create more problems than you will solve by using a pesticide or a herbicide, but particularly pesticides. The thing that people need to realize is that you need baddies so that the goodies will come. So
yeah,
you'll need the insects that you don't want there that are, destroying your plants for then the beneficial insects to come in, swoop in and save the day. But if you are continually beating down bad insects with herbicides, the good insects won't come. And the problem, in my perspective, and I've seen it in previous clients' gardens, where it just snowballs and it's
yeah.
constant, and you're constantly putting chemical into the garden. And for me, it's just ridiculous because it'd all sort itself out if you just stepped back and took your hands
100%.
off the wheel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a lose lose,
um,
really.
yeah, absolutely. It's all about balance, really, is what you were just speaking about.
Yeah.
Um, Gardeners often think that they need to have things manicured and looking
Mm.
perfect and, have a sense of control over their environment. What would you say in terms of, leaving things wild? How would you say people should, flick their mindset?
Wow, it's a difficult thing to do. It's so deeply ingrained in. I mean, I obviously can't speak for the Australian public, but for the
It's pretty
British public,
similar.
it's just yeah, it's just it's that idea that's been passed down to us for generations. The rural idea of just neatness, uniformity. All those old French gardens, everything like that, neatness and we've grown up to see a freshly mown lawn as a beautiful thing, and it's like a fight against nature. We're always fighting to keep it how we want it, and that's the right thing to do. And I think what I would say first of all is don't let your neighbors impact your thinking, because I know people who they don't want to be mowing their lawns, but they're only doing it because almost out of shame, because they see
Yeah.
their neighbors looking over the fence. And also, I think that because wild grass and long, scrubby grass almost has also a connotation with poverty and neglect as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I don't know how we're going to change that. We're only going to change that through education, really, and an awareness. What I would say is, if you're thinking of let's say you've got a front garden and you've got a high footfall of people walking past, let the wildflower meadow grow, because that's a great thing to do, and just put up a sign saying pollinator friendly garden, and that should solve the problem of all those looks, hopefully, because then people just put a bee on it, because people
That's actually
love
a
bees and
very good
love
idea.
lawns, but they don't understand that the lawn is literally the worst possible thing for the bee. I remember, I walked through like retail parks, and there'll be bee hotels and bug hotels that have charities have raised money to be put there, and yet it's just they're surrounded by freshly mown lawns that are mown it once a week throughout the summer, and
Yeah.
it's like, of course there's no insects in there. You're consistently creating the most artificial landscape possible. And so yeah, I think we have an obsession with lawns, and I think, look, you don't have to have it doesn't you don't have to, I'm not saying put your whole garden as a wildflower meadow or anything like that, but even a quarter, the part that you don't really go to, you know you don't even have to do anything. Some people really don't want to go at it and get, and I obviously plant native, that's what I would say. And people, like strip back the turf and, put the seeds in at the right time, and, really trying to get it, like rewilding, to a place of higher biodiversity as quickly as possible. But also, you could just do a 5-year project. You just leave a part of your garden every year for 5 years, see what you get, and you'll be absolutely amazed what comes. And you'll see things that you never thought you'd probably never even seen in the UK. You'll see insects that you'd never seen before. and simply just by doing nothing, you're protecting British wildlife by doing that, and the same would be said in Australia or anywhere.
Mm.
So yeah, I think I have a real issue with lawns. I understand that people love them, but I just see it all the time. One day it's a beautiful wildflower meadow, and the next day it's been cut down, and it's just no one's walking past that, no one's using that bit of land. Someone's been paid to do that, and it's
Yeah.
just crazy.
So your advice, do nothing. I think that's very good advice, to be
Easy
honest.
gardening, right?
I have a bugbear, actually, which is an interesting one in the UK. And look, we're not immune in Australia, but you see a lot less of it. And that is artificial turf or
Oh my
astroturf.
god.
And it's people
Yeah.
our age, dude. It's like new
Yep.
homeowners. And they're like,
Yep.
oh, you know what I'll do? I'll put plastic down. Like, what
Yep.
the fuck?
Yeah.
Honestly, I
Well,
can't deal with it.
yeah. The only thing worse than a lawn is an artificial lawn.
That's right.
Just when you thought it got bad, it can get worse. Yeah, and that's just it's laziness and not knowing. It's just being so. And that's the thing, that when you idealize something like a lawn, and you don't realize that that's a really bad thing for nature, then you can then create something which is even worse and still think that's great.
Yeah.
And
And
again,
it's
that
not
oh my
maintenance
god,
free either. Like, you have
no,
to vacuum that shit.
yeah.
Like,
And plants will find a way. They'll come through that in a couple of years.
you still got to weed
But
it.
then
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, but then you've got horrible artificial turf in the soil.
Yeah, breaking
Anyway,
down in the sun. Yeah, it's
yeah,
ridiculous. Anyway.
yeah. No, I totally agree. Whenever I see that, I feel almost physically ill, I'd say.
I do too. Yeah, I have like a physical reaction to it. Like,
It should be banned. It could be banned. Just like that's one thing I want to see for gardening in the UK.
yes.
All invasive species should not be able to be sold in any garden centres or
Yeah.
anywhere in the UK. I think it's crazy that's possible. Pesticides, unless you have, you should have to apply for a pesticide license, and those should only be granted in very specific cases. I think it's crazy that just the average person can go to the shop and buy liters of poison and pour it on their gardens or pour it wherever. How is that legal? And then
Fungicides as well, to be honest.
exactly, all of the sides,
Yeah.
they're bad, and clues in the name. And then I mean, this is I guess a bugbear of both of ours, but yeah, ban artificial turf. I'd
Yes,
love to see
please.
that too.
Oh, Tom, thank you so much for your time. I really, really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you. It's been, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. Let everyone know where they can find you, though, before you run off.
Cool. Yeah. So I run an Instagram account called Natureman Tom, or at Natureman Tom. I'm planning to create YouTube soon and starting to do long form content. So please give me a follow. Really appreciate that. And yeah, thank you once again. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like the show, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button. Tell a friend or two, or maybe even give the show a 5-star rating and a review. If you want more Gardeners Lodge content, you can find our website, our Instagram and our TikTok in the show notes below this episode. The Gardeners Lodge podcast is a growing media production.